Percy Jackson Season 1 has concluded on Disney Plus with all the episodes officially released. So today we're going to rank all 8 episodes from the least best to the best. Now just a heads up, this is my list, so go ahead and join me down in the comments section to share your ranking of the 8 episodes of Percy Jackson Season 1. Also going into this, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't watched the season, then go check it out. Last thing, I just want to say I like this entire season. I don't think there was a bad episode or a filler episode. There were just some I found less enjoyable than others, so they are lower on the list, but with that being said, let's get started. Coming in at last place, we got episode 6. Now this episode is definitely important to the plot with building up the storyline with Luke, Hermes, Grover, and Kronos. However, despite all that, the main premise of the episode of our main characters going to a casino that traps you by slowing down time is a cool concept that wasn't taken full advantage of. We never really feel like any of our characters are in danger, never feel like they are succumbing to the effects of the casino. The casino more or less felt like a backdrop for telling the story rather than it being a fun trap our heroes had to overcome. I think a great way to have fixed this issue would have been to still have Percy and Annabeth go find Hermes. However, the effects of the hotel would constantly be affecting them, even during their conversation with Hermes, with them forgetting information from time to time. And we'd see them being together helps nullify these effects. And for Grover, I think you could have cut the Augustus part of this quest and still had his want to find Pan, but made it more fun. Have less of Grover talking to Augustus, and more of him playing at the arcade games. If this was done, we could still have the A-plot of Percy and Annabeth with their serious side quest to find Hermes, which would convey still having that tension from the casino, and we could have the B-plot of Grover feeling the full effects of the casino, and looking for Pan while using the fun aspects of the casino to portray that. Now, I still love this episode. It doesn't drag, it doesn't feel out of place. I actually thought it was the funniest episode, with Percy trying to learn how to drive. Definitely was a nice change of pace for this point in the story. But I simply just think that this episode could have been more of that. At 7th place, we got episode 3. Episode 3 is one of those episodes I do appreciate for its adherence for expanding on characters, such as Medusa, and making her this victim of the gods' wrath that ended up turning her into an evil person. And this episode was a great way to portray the overall theme of the series, which is not all heroes look like a hero, and not all monsters look like a monster. I also like the character development between our main characters here, as they start off distant and abrasive towards each other, which leads into some pretty funny banter and bickering, but in the end, they come together and realize they are not so different from one another, and that their friendship is much more important than the petty differences they hold on to. The only thing that does it for this episode for me is that it was a very slow episode, with us not really getting to the Medusa section until about halfway through the episode. The stuff before Medusa with the bus ride and Alecto hunting down our main trio did have its moments, but I did think the overall experience of it was filled with lots of exposition and some moments that are hit or miss depending on your sense of humor. Now, in terms of the exposition, I can't blame the episode too much for it doing so, as you need to set up this big world for not only future episodes, but for future seasons, so it made sense story-wise. However, I still found this episode to be a slower one on the rewatch, as it wasn't as enjoyable as the others on this list. Now, at the 6th spot, we got episode 1. This is the part of my list where the quality of the episodes start to increase, in my opinion. The first episode was a fantastic introduction to this big Greek mythological world that also gave us our first ever on-screen interaction to Percy Jackson, with all his sass, charm, and wit. He's the perfect character to start our journey off with. Also, this episode has some of my favorite moments in the series, with the Mrs. Dodds scene and the Minotaur fight definitely being up there with some of the more visually appealing scenes. Speaking of which, this episode's cinematography may be one of the best out of the entire season. The different uses of color and lighting in many shots really felt like a cinematic experience, like I was watching something in the movie theater. Also, the strong moments in this episode really do shine, where Percy lives in this world where no one accepts him, except for his mother, which really drives in home our care for their relationship, which when by the end of this episode, when she is presumably killed off, you really feel the anguish Percy is feeling in this moment. Now, I did say this episode had its strong moments, but that doesn't come without some weaker ones. There's lots of setup in this episode, lots of things it does to make you feel like something is coming, and it definitely sets us up very nicely. However, on rewatch, it's just one of those episodes where you gotta get through it because it's more about setting up rather than just about being an enjoyable episode. But, you know, this was the first episode, so it is the least offensive when it comes to reasoning for setting up the world and characters. Just wish we had a little more in this episode to work with in terms of showing what Percy is dealing with, rather than telling. Coming in at the 5th spot, we got episode 4, a genuinely wonderful episode of television. This is the part in the series where you really feel like the adventure structure and the characters are taking shape, with our main trio working to accept and learn about each other rather than constantly arguing. Also, the main villain in this episode, Echidna, was such a menacing character. She's a monster that simply just wants to kill our main characters, which in a way it's a nice change of pace, as it gives us a lot of the episode to really fear her presence and have our main characters try to figure out how to stop her. Some of the character moments in this was fantastic, with Percy and Annabeth really bonding and becoming actual friends, which was very nice to see for the development of their relationship. Also, everything at St. Louis was great. Seeing an actual landmark be used as a location for this Monster of the Week episode is wonderful world building to tying this Percy Jackson world to our real world, and I'd love to see this show have our characters visit more real locations in later seasons. Another thing that really worked here was the Chimera. The giant monster Percy fights at the top of the St. Louis Arch is a great payoff to all the tension built up in the episode from us not seeing the Chimera until now. Also, I found the cinematography to be quite wonderful in this episode, with beautiful sunrises and massive scale St. Louis shots. Now, this episode only suffers in terms of a bit of world building and setup in the beginning, which again on rewatch doesn't hit me as entertaining as the first time viewing. However, it doesn't drag on for all too long and jumps straight into the action and character building quickly, which is one of this show's strengths in my opinion. In fourth place, we have episode 2. The Camp Half-Blood episode was an incredible watch. It's a fun episode that shows us this magical Greek camp where demigods go to train and hunt monsters, and I loved it. Lots of different and clear distinct locations that exist in the camp, like the archery range, the forges, and the cabins. With this, the episode really made camp feel like a place I'd want to go and live at. Also, the quieter moments really worked for me in this episode, where in between scenes like Percy's dreams of Kronos, Percy trying to contact his mother, and even the nice moments we get with Luke, Percy's mentor and brother figure at camp, were all really nice moments in a grand episode that introduces so much. Also, Capture the Flag being a highlight where we get a lot of great moments of Percy goofing off and feeling out of place in this world was entertaining. Then we get the big fight scene with Clarice, Percy's bully at camp, and they go toe to toe, swing for swing in a raw, fast-paced sword fight, which if the big CGI monster in episode 1 didn't do it for you in terms of a fight scene, then this one definitely will. Also, Percy being claimed as the son of Poseidon was fantastic, with it having the gravitas of him being a powerful child of a powerful god, but in the end, he's still an outcast. I think for me, I really only wanted this episode to be a bit longer to spend even more time here, as I think this is simply just a solid episode that really sells you into this world of Camp Half-Blood and demigods and everything else, so having even more of that would have just been perfect. Now we get into our top 3, starting it off with episode 5. The Waterland side quest episode is definitely a highlight within this season. Our 3 main actors feel very comfortable in their roles as Percy, Annabeth, and Grover at this point in the story, and they were all given a lot of emotional scenes that I think most child actors would really struggle to sell, but they all absolutely killed it. In this episode, we meet the god of war, Ares, who is just a fantastic addition to this universe. He is so charismatic and funny, but also clearly has this serious and dangerous side to him. Furthermore, the quest to Waterland was absolutely fantastic. It's a very creative location that's entertaining to watch see our characters traverse through, but also fun to see our characters grow as people, and learn about Greek mythology, and how their stories intertwine with those stories to help shape them to be better people. Now, I said in episode 4 we really got some really good Percy and Annabeth scenes. Well, this episode expands upon that, where it not only sold me on their bond as close friends, but maybe even hinting to something closer than friends later down the line. And not to mention the scenes with Grover and Ares was an absolute delight, with Grover manipulating the god of war into revealing who supposedly the lightning thief is, which not only gave Grover a fantastic character moment, but it gave us more time with Ares, which I mean more time with him is only a positive. As a whole though, this episode felt well crafted to tell a compelling story that shows the strong points of Percy Jackson lies in the side quests, as sometimes it's about the journey, not the destination. Coming in second place, we got episode 7. The penultimate episode of the season is probably the most gut-punching and heartbreaking out of all the others, and I mean that in a good way. The way we get the revelations was compelling, with Percy thinking Clarice and Hades took the bolt, then thinking Ares took it. Then we get there and we find Hades didn't take the bolt and that he is actually innocent. It's great writing since the season really built up that Hades was the main villain, so him to be this pretty chill dude was very on brand for the humor this franchise captures, and it was a great subversion of expectations. It's also a very heartbreaking episode, as not only does Percy in the end have to leave his mom behind to go save the world, we get more backstory scenes of Percy's mom as she struggles to raise her son. And this leads to a beautifully written moment where Percy's father shows up and confronts Sally. It's a scene that is more tragic than anything, which is what Greek mythology is all about. On top of all of that, this episode was a big journey for our main 3 characters through the underworld, which is the afterlife in Greek mythology, and they have to go through so many challenges to actually reach Hades' palace, which was very entertaining, and it's what this story needed in terms of showing more of the Greek mythological world of Percy Jackson, with the extreme wide shots of the underworld conveying how small the characters feel and how out of place they are in this underworld ecosystem. Episode 7 really stands on its own as a compelling episode of television that can be very entertaining, but also very heartbreaking and tragic. And coming in at number 1, we got Episode 8. This is the final episode in the season, and I know I said earlier that this story is about the journey, not the destination. However, when we get to the destination in Percy Jackson and the Olympians, it throws that statement way out the park. Episode 8 is just jam-packed with so much content and so many scenes, and I think it was all balanced very well. The sword training scenes with Luke that not only established Luke to be Percy's friend once more, but also setting up to the climactic Ares fight was a perfect addition to this finale. The Ares fight itself was epic and grand in scale, really seeing Percy, who was a kid, trying to combat the experienced god of war, was tense and well choreographed. And the big climactic moment where Percy unleashes the tidal wave at Ares looks fantastic effects-wise. We also get probably my favorite scene in the show, Percy on Mount Olympus, just bad-mouthing Zeus to his face. Percy is a very compelling character, and in this moment, we see that to its fullest extent. And then Percy's father coming in to save his son in the nick of time was a satisfying way to introduce him to his son, which then leads into a beautiful heart-to-heart between the two. That leaves it open for the audience to understand the meaning of their conference. We then get Luke, Percy's mentor and big brother figure at camp, betraying Percy, and it really hurts as Luke is someone who wants to kill the gods and take down Olympus because of how the gods treat their children, and the part that hurts the most is that you understand Luke's reason to do this. He may be extreme in his methods, but throughout the series, we learn how terrible the gods are and how terrible they treat their children. So Luke is a very sympathetic villain in this context. And after all is said and done, Percy, Annabeth, and Grover get their climactic finale where each of them go off on their own paths, but promise each other in the end that next summer they will meet at Camp Half-Blood once again. It's episodes like these that are able to contextualize the meanings and themes of the series, which are able to display them in a way that makes it all make sense. Which when I watch this episode, I feel like everything I watched before this connected and I can see how we got to this point. And I was left with a satisfying taste in my mouth, with room for more. And with season 2 being recently announced to be officially happening for this show, it makes me really excited to see what Percy Jackson and the Olympians has in store for the next embarkment of this incredible adventure it will take us upon. That's my ranking of Percy Jackson and the Olympians Season 1. Once again, let me know your ranking down in the comments below. Thank you for watching.